Hello everybody! Today I decided to make a soap volcano. This is not something that we want, but I wanted to demonstrate a soap volcano because there are a lot of soap makers out there that make hot process soap and have never experienced a soap volcano. They can be very hot, very dangerous, and very wasteful. So I want to give you some tips on how to avoid a soap volcano. What I'm doing here is everything that you should not do. What I've got in my crock pot are very hot oils. My lye water that I just added is also very hot. And I'm going to add my stick blender in to emulsify my oils and my lye water together, which is normally what we do, but we normally don't want to add everything at such high temperatures. I didn't check my temperatures on anything, but I'm sure they were well over 200 degrees. So using my stick blender to emulsify it, you can see that it comes together pretty quick. It's not everything that I'm going to add at this point, but when you add a stick blender, when you're mixing it, you almost have to use a stick blender, honestly, because it will like wear your arm out if you're just using a spatula or a spoon to stir this together to emulsify it. But the issue with that is a stick blender, just because of the sheer friction of the stick blender, that's also introducing more heat. Okay, and so you've got your hot oils, your hot lye water, and the stick blender, which is also adding more heat. What I'm adding here is some farm fresh goat milk, which is a wonderful ingredient. I add it to all my soaps, but it also contains sugar. Sugar creates heat, and it creates heat very quickly. So there's another factor that you have to add in there that's contributing to your soap getting really hot really fast. And as you can tell by the soap batter here, it went from just a white color to it's gonna like a yellowy all the way to an orange. And what that is kind of the milk basically scorching just a little bit. It doesn't hurt your soap and it doesn't affect your final product. It's actually fine. It's just, it creates heat to your soap batter. So you have to take that in consideration anytime that you add milk to a hot process soap, and even cold process soap for that matter, because the cold process soap can also get hot and it will actually crack. So typically when I make my cold process soap, I do put it in my refrigerator for a few hours to prevent the soap from volcanoing out of the mold in a cold process soap. But I can't remember if I said it at the beginning of the video, but what I'm actually making here is a salt soap recipe. And the salt soap recipe that I've made is very high in coconut oil. And coconut oil tends to get very hot very fast. So that's also another contributing factor. Usually it's not one thing that creates a soap volcano. It's a multitude of things coming together that create the perfect storm, so to speak, and you have your volcano. And after making soap for quite a while, you can kind of get a feel for what the batter is doing at what time. And I know when I first started, I always had a hard time trying to recognize the phases, but it's just with experience you get to kind of understand and know your soap and know your soap batter. And I'm going to show you right here where it looks like it's completely separated. You can see where it's, the oils and the lye water are still separating. They're not emulsifying together. That's perfectly fine. That happens sometimes when you add a milk product to your soap batter. What'll happen is you just have to emulsify it back together. And the stick blender, just using that for a minute or two, will usually bring it back together to a cake batter consistency. But in this case, I'm going to bypass that phase altogether, and we are just going to go straight from it being liquidy to a soap volcano pretty much within just a minute or two here. I think this video is only about 6 minutes long, so it didn't take long to create this volcano. But right here, I'm just trying to generate more heat with this stick blender. And I think at this point is where I can see that the volcano is getting close. So I'm going to remove my crock pot from the actual base, the heat base. And so there's no more heat being introduced from the crock pot. I had already turned it off, but you know those crock pots hold heat. So there's enough heat in there with the stick blender to go ahead and feed this volcano. And I have my water in the back there that you can see, a water bottle, because I knew this was going to happen. So I had everything ready. You can add cold water to it to kind of help try and cool it down I didn't obviously cool mine down enough because my volcano completely just went everywhere. Which I didn't want it to go completely out of the pan, but it did. You have to stir really, really fast. And when you stir using a spatula, I was telling you to hold on, it's coming. But when you stir using a spatula, you're introducing air, the cool air, so you're actually cooling it down. Whereas with a stick blender, you're introducing friction, which introduces more heat. So that's why I switched over to the spatula there. And then I guess I cooled it down too much, so I'm grabbing the stick blender to introduce more heat because I'm trying to create this volcano for you guys, because it's not always predictable, because as you know, if you make soap, the soap does what it will do. Sometimes it doesn't always do what you want it to do. Kind of like baking is how I look at it. But here comes the volcano. You can see it coming up. I'm just going to keep stirring because I was trying to not let it go completely out of my pot, which I was completely unsuccessful at. I'm going to add the water here and trying to cool it down a little bit, but this thing was hot. I mean, really, really hot. I have had this happen one other time where it just completely went, I lost everything. I mean, it went all over the counter, everywhere. And I lost quite a bit of it in this one, as you can see here. And I didn't give up, though. I kept stirring it, trying to cool it down, trying to show you guys that it can be saved. It can be a little dangerous and a little scary and really hot, and your arm gets really tired. But there you go. There's your soap volcano. And, I kept stirring it and gotten it cooled down a little bit. And any soap that you salvage from this is perfectly safe to use. I mean, like whatever's left in the crock pot, you can totally save it and use it. I just would let it cook for a few more minutes just to make sure that it's cooked thoroughly. But at this point, it's had so much heat introduced to it that it should be fine. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video on a soap volcano. So yeah, soaping can be kind of dangerous and kind of scary, but a lot of fun. And sometimes just knowing what to expect and what to do can be helpful. So I hope this was helpful to somebody and that you guys enjoyed it. And now let me go make a batch that is not going to volcano.